Elena Morales moved through the streets of Copper Ridge like a shadow, her shawl pulled low to hide the twisted scars that marked the left side of her face and neck. 23 years old and already resigned to a life in the margins, she'd learned to time her errands for quiet hours, when fewer people would see her, fewer children would point and whisper. The burned scars were a legacy from childhood. The night flames consumed her family's adobe house, taking her Apache mother's life and leaving Elena marked forever. The townspeople had decided such misfortune couldn't be natural, that Elena carried some dark mark bringing bad luck to anyone who got too close. Elena was the finest seamstress in 3 counties, but her customers preferred conducting business through intermediaries, rather than face the woman they called La Bruja, the witch. Elena's work, but Elena's price, old Maria Santos would say when delivering dresses to the ladies who wanted her skill but not her presence. It was an arrangement that kept food on Elena's table while allowing the town to maintain its comfortable distance from the woman it had decided was cursed. As Elena approached the store, she could see a crowd gathered around the sheriff's office across the street. Sheriff Hendricks had died 3 weeks ago, heart failure, though some whispered it was divine punishment for being too friendly with the Hexed woman. Elena had sewn his funeral suit, her final service to one of the few people in town who treated her with basic human decency. The new sheriff was arriving today, another stranger who would have to learn Copper Ridge's unspoken rules about which people mattered and which were best ignored. Elena hoped he would be the kind of man who minded his own business and let her mind hers. She was hurrying past the crowd when a child's ball rolled directly into her path. Without thinking, Elena bent to retrieve it, looking up to see little Tommy Martinez running toward her with the fearless enthusiasm of a 5-year-old. But before the boy could reach her, his mother appeared like a protective fury. "Tommy, no!" Rosa Martinez grabbed her son's arm and pulled him back, making the sign of the cross as she stared at Elena with undisguised fear. "Don't touch anything she's touched. You know better." Elena set the ball on the ground and stepped back, her face burning with familiar shame. "I was just stay away from my boy," Rosa hissed, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "Haven't you brought enough misfortune to this town?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the onlookers. Elena heard the familiar whispers. "Bad luck, woman. Cursed by her heathen mother. Wherever she goes, trouble follows." Elena pulled her shawl tighter and turned to flee, but found her path blocked by a tall figure she didn't recognize. The new sheriff stood between her and escape, and for the first time in years, Elena found herself forced to look directly into a stranger's eyes. Ben Callahan was perhaps 40, with the weathered face and careful posture of a man who'd spent years in dangerous country. His brown hair was touched with premature gray, and his blue eyes held the kind of steady calm that came from seeing enough of life's hardships to know which battles were worth fighting. But what stopped Elena cold was the complete absence of fear or revulsion in his gaze. "Ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat with the automatic courtesy of a man raised to respect women regardless of their appearance or reputation. "I'm Ben Callahan, the new sheriff. I don't believe we've been introduced." The crowd fell silent, watching this interaction with the fascination of people witnessing something unprecedented. Elena realized she was staring and quickly lowered her eyes, but not before she caught something in the sheriff's expression that made her chest tighten with dangerous hope. "Elena Morales," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Morales." Ben's voice carried the kind of genuine warmth Elena hadn't heard directed at her in longer than she could remember. "I hope you'll forgive my ignorance, but I'm new to town and still learning my way around. Would you mind pointing me toward the seamstress? I need some alterations done, and folks tell me there's a woman here who does exceptional work." The crowd stirred uneasily. Rosa Martinez stepped forward, her face flushed with righteous indignation. "Sheriff, perhaps no one's told you about Miss Morales' situation. The curse she carries. Decent folks don't." "Mrs. Martinez." Ben's voice remained polite, but something in his tone made the woman step back. "I appreciate your concern, but I reckon I can make my own decisions about who I do business with." He turned back to Elena, who was still struggling to process this unprecedented public show of respect. "Miss Morales, would this afternoon be convenient, say around 2 o'clock? Elena nodded mutely, too stunned to speak. Ben touched his hat brim again and walked away, leaving Elena standing in the middle of a crowd that was buzzing with whispered speculation about the new sheriff's obvious poor judgment. Elena hurried home to her small house behind the church, her mind racing. In all her years of hiding from the world's cruelty, she'd learned not to hope for kindness from strangers. Hope was dangerous. It made the inevitable disappointment cut deeper. But as she prepared her modest sewing room for the sheriff's visit, Elena found herself looking in the mirror for the first time in months. The scars were still there, twisted and purple against her olive skin, a permanent reminder of the night that had changed everything. But for just a moment she tried to see herself through different eyes, not as the cursed woman of Copper Ridge's whispers, but as simply Elena, a woman skilled with needle and thread, worthy of basic human respect. At exactly 2 o'clock, Ben Callahan knocked on her door with the punctuality of a man who understood that reliability was a form of respect. Elena opened it with trembling hands, still half convinced this was some cruel joke the town was playing on the Hexed woman. "Miss Morales," Ben said, removing his hat as he stepped inside, "thank you for seeing me on such short notice." As he looked around her small but spotlessly clean sewing room, Elena saw him take in the evidence of her skill: quilts of extraordinary beauty, dresses that transformed simple fabric into art, embroidery that seemed to capture light and shadow in silk thread. "This is remarkable work," Ben said, running careful fingers along a partially completed wedding dress. "I've traveled from California to Texas, and I've never seen finer craftsmanship." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks, not the burning shame she was accustomed to, but something warmer, more welcome. "Thank you. What alterations do you need?" Ben pulled out a dress uniform from his saddlebags, the blue wool worn but well maintained. "This belonged to my father. He was cavalry, served in the Apache Wars before settling down to ranch life. I've been meaning to have it fitted properly for formal occasions." As Elena examined the uniform, she felt the quality of the fabric, saw the careful mending that spoke of a man who took care of his possessions. "Your father must have been a good man to have kept this so well." He was, tough but fair, the kind of lawman who believed justice meant protecting everyone, not just the people who looked like him or worshipped like him. Ben met her eyes directly. "He taught me that a person's worth isn't written on their skin, it's written in their actions." Elena's breath caught. This man was speaking directly to the heart of her existence, acknowledging without explicitly naming the prejudice that had shaped her entire adult life. "I'll need to take measurements," she said quietly. "Of course." As Elena worked, Ben talked easily about his travels, his experiences as a cavalry scout, his hopes for bringing stability to Copper Ridge. His voice was calm and unforced, treating their interaction as perfectly normal rather than the social transgression the townspeople considered it. "Miss Morales," he said as she finished her measurements, "might I ask you something personal?" Elena tensed, waiting for the inevitable questions about her scars, her mother's heritage, the supposed curse that followed her. Would you consider having dinner with me tomorrow evening? Nothing fancy, just a chance to get to know someone who clearly has more sense and skill than half this town combined. Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Dinner. You and me, if you're willing. Ben's expression was serious but kind. I know it might cause talk, but I've found that people who mind their own business tend to be happier than those who spend their time gossiping about others. Elena felt the walls she'd built around her heart begin to crack. This man, this stranger, was offering her something she'd stopped believing existed. The chance to be seen as simply human, worthy of companionship and respect. Sheriff Callahan, she said carefully, the people of this town believe I bring bad luck to anyone who associates with me. They've believed it for 15 years. Ben studied her face, not the scars but her eyes, as if he were reading something written there that only he could see. Miss Morales, he said finally, I've been in enough truly unlucky situations to know the difference between superstition and reality. And looking at your work, talking with you, I'd say any man lucky enough to earn your friendship would be blessed, not cursed. As Ben left her house that afternoon, Elena stood at her window watching him walk back toward town with the confident stride of a man comfortable with his choices. For the first time in 15 years, she allowed herself to wonder what it might feel like to be seen not as a marked woman, but simply as Elena, worthy of respect, companionship, and perhaps even something deeper. The possibility terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Elena spent the following day in anxious preparation, mending her one good dress and washing her hair with lavender soap saved for occasions that never seemed to come. Ben arrived at sunset with desert wildflowers that must have taken considerable effort to find. Miss Morales, you look lovely. I thought we might walk to Maria's cantina. As they walked through town, Elena was acutely aware of stares that followed them. Curtains twitched, conversation stopped, and more than one person made the sign of the cross. Tell me about your family, Ben said conversationally. Elena hesitated. My father was Mexican, a vaquero. My mother was... She paused. Apache? Ben supplied gently. Elena nodded, surprised by his matter-of-fact tone. Chiricahua. She was captured as a child and raised by missionaries, but she never forgot the old ways. That sounds like a rich heritage. You must miss her wisdom. The simple acceptance nearly brought tears to Elena's eyes. She died when I was 8, in the fire that... Elena touched her scarred cheek. That marked you, but not in the way these people think. Maria's cantina fell silent as they entered. The proprietor approached with obvious reluctance, unable to offend the new sheriff, but unable to ignore community superstition. Sheriff Callahan, perhaps you would be more comfortable at a private table in back. Ben looked around the quiet cantina. This table suits us fine, Mrs. Gonzalez. Their conversation was interrupted by Pete Hawkins, a ranch hand with too much drink and too little sense. He swaggered over with 2 companions. Sheriff, folks are wondering if you know what you're doing sitting down with the witch woman. Ben didn't look up from his food. I'm having dinner with Miss Morales. Most folks just call her bad luck with legs. Ben set down his fork and looked at Pete with practiced calm. Mr. Hawkins, I'd appreciate it if you'd mind your own business. This is my business. When the law consorts with hexed women, it affects all of us. The only disease I see spreading is ignorance. Pete's face flushed with anger. You don't know what you're dealing with. That woman carries a curse. The fire that killed her mother, the drought, the cattle sickness, all traces back to her. Elena felt something snap inside her. Years of silent endurance suddenly felt unbearable. The fire was started by men like you, she said quietly. Men who thought my mother was too proud, too unwilling to forget her Apache heritage. Men who decided burning us out would teach other mixed families to know their place. The silence was deafening. Elena had spoken the truth everyone knew but no one acknowledged. Pete's hand moved toward his gun, but found himself looking down Ben's Colt barrel. "I'd reconsider that," Ben said conversationally. Pete and his men left, but his eyes burned with hatred. "This isn't over, Sheriff." Ben holstered his weapon and covered Elena's scarred hand with his own. "Elena, may I call you Elena? You are not cursed. You are a woman of remarkable strength who deserves better than this town has given you." Elena stared at their joined hands, seeing how naturally his fingers fit around hers. "Why are you being kind to me?" Ben smiled. "Because the first moment I saw you, I knew I was looking at the best thing that had happened to me in longer than I care to remember." The threats began 3 days after dinner at Maria's cantina. Elena found a dead rattlesnake nailed to her door with a note reading, "Hex this." Her windows were broken twice in 1 week, forcing her to board them up. Anonymous voices called warnings in the dark. "Send the sheriff away or you'll both burn." Elena tried to hide the harassment from Ben, but he was a trained lawman with scout instincts. He noticed the boarded windows, the way Elena flinched at sudden sounds. "Elena, you can't protect me from the truth. I know when someone's under siege." Elena wrapped her shawl tighter. "I don't want you hurt because of me. When these people decide someone is a threat, they don't stop until the threat is gone." "Like they didn't stop with your mother?" Elena had been wondering when Ben would ask directly about that night. There were 5 of them. Ranch hands mostly, but led by Jeremiah Walsh. He owned the biggest spread outside town. They came after midnight. Ben listened without interruption, his hand finding hers. "My mother woke me and hid me in the root cellar. She told me to stay hidden no matter what I heard." Elena's voice broke. "She knew she wasn't going to survive, but she made sure I would." "How did you get burned?" "I couldn't stay hidden. When I heard her screaming, I tried to get to her. The roof collapsed and I was trapped for hours before Sheriff Hendricks found me." "What happened to the men who set the fire?" "Nothing. They claimed they were trying to put out an accidental fire. No one questioned their story except Hendricks, and he was told to let it go." Ben was quiet for a long moment. "Jeremiah Walsh, he's still around?" "Died 2 years ago. Heart attack." Because men who commit murder together tend to look out for each other. If Walsh was the leader but not the only one, there might be people who've spent 15 years worrying about what you remember. The implications sent a chill down Elena's spine. "You think the harassment isn't just superstition?" "I think someone's working hard to convince you to leave town." "Elena, how many of those men are still alive?" Elena's mind raced through half-remembered faces. "I was 8 and it was dark, but Pete Hawkins, I remember his voice, the way he laughed when my mother begged. And maybe Tom Bradley, who runs the bank." Ben's expression hardened. "Anyone else?" "Maybe others, but I can't be sure." The sound of approaching horses echoed through the night. Elena counted at least 6 riders. Ben stepped in front of her as the horsemen reined in at her property edge. Pete Hawkins sat his horse in the center. "Sheriff Callahan, we need to talk." "Then make an appointment at my office." "This can't wait. We're here as concerned citizens to tell you that your association with the witch woman has got to stop." Ben's stance shifted. "That sounds like a threat, Mr. Hawkins." "It's a warning. Accidents happen to lawmen who don't listen. Sheriff Hendricks learned that lesson." Elena's blood turned to ice. "What did you say?" Pete's attention shifted to her. Nothing that concerns you, witchwoman, but Ben had heard it too. Are you saying Sheriff Hendricks's death wasn't natural? I'm saying men who protect the wrong people sometimes find themselves in unfortunate situations, Pete replied. Just like half-breed squaws, who don't know when to keep quiet. Elena realized her mother's murder had never been isolated. Hendricks had died because he'd been too kind to her. Now Ben was walking the same dangerous path. Elena, go inside and bar the door, Ben said quietly. No. Elena stepped beside him. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of letting murderers terrorize this town because people would rather believe in curses than face truth. Pete's face contorted with rage. You should have died in that fire with your heathen mother. We made one mistake 15 years ago and we've been paying for it ever since. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Several other men shifted uncomfortably. They'd come to intimidate, not confess to murder. Ben's gun was in his hand before anyone could draw. Pete Hawkins, you're under arrest for the murder of Maria Morales and conspiracy in Sheriff Hendricks's death. You got no proof, Pete snarled. I've got your confession, witnessed by 7 men. From the darkness emerged Tom Bradley, Dr. Martinez, and 3 other business owners Elena had assumed were enemies. Pete, Tom Bradley said heavily, it's over. We can't keep living with this. Pete spun toward them. Tom, you coward. We agreed to keep quiet 15 years ago when we were scared boys, Tom interrupted. But I'm tired of letting an innocent woman pay for our cowardice. Dr. Martinez stepped forward. Elena, I treated your burns that night. I knew they couldn't have come from an accidental fire. I should have spoken up then. Ben kept his gun on Pete. How many were involved? 8 originally, Tom said. Boys mostly, following Walsh because he promised we'd be heroes. We were stupid and scared. Pete slipped foxglove into Hendricks's coffee, Dr. Martinez added. Made it look like heart failure. Pete drew his gun with desperate speed, but Ben was faster. His shot took Pete in the shoulder, spinning him around. Pete's gun flew from his hand as he dropped to his knees, cursing. It's over, Ben said. Tom, Dr. Martinez, I appreciate your courage. As Ben organized the arrests, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years. The feeling of being believed, of having her truth validated. The standoff ended not with violence, but with the unexpected arrival of men Elena had never thought would take her side. From the darkness emerged Tom Bradley, Dr. Martinez, and 3 other business owners she'd assumed were enemies. Pete, Tom Bradley said heavily, it's over. We can't keep living with this. Pete spun toward them, face twisted with betrayal. Tom, you coward. We agreed to keep quiet 15 years ago when we were scared boys who'd followed a madman into murder. But I'm tired of letting an innocent woman pay for our cowardice. Dr. Martinez stepped forward. Elena, I treated your burns that night. I knew they couldn't have come from an accidental fire. I should have spoken up then. Ben kept his gun trained on Pete and his remaining allies. How many were involved? 8 originally, Tom said quietly. Boys mostly, following Walsh because he promised we'd be heroes. We were stupid and scared. Jeremiah Walsh died of natural causes, Dr. Martinez added. But Sheriff Hendricks, that was Pete. He slipped foxglove into his coffee. Made it look like heart failure. Elena felt the world shift as 15 years of lies crumbled into truth. You're all dead men, Pete snarled, drawing his gun with desperate speed, but Ben was faster, his shot taking Pete in the shoulder and spinning him around. Pete's gun flew from his hand as he dropped to his knees, cursing. It's over, Ben said. Tom, Dr. Martinez, I appreciate your courage in coming forward. As Ben organized the arrests, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years. The feeling of being believed, of having her truth validated. Dr. Martinez approached her with tears of shame and relief. "Elena, your mother was a good woman, a healer who helped anyone who needed it. She didn't deserve what happened." Elena nodded, understanding that forgiveness would be a longer process than this single night. She would have wanted the truth to come out. Ben finished securing the prisoners and turned to Elena. "How are you holding up?" Elena looked around at the scene, her small house surrounded by men who'd just witnessed the unraveling of Copperidge's darkest secret. "I feel like I can breathe for the first time in 15 years. Ben smiled with warmth and what looked very much like love. "Elena Morales, you are the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever met. If you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to hide again." Elena felt tears of joy start to fall. "Ben Callahan, you called me your luck from the first day, but you were wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "You're not the lucky one. I am." 6 months later, Elena stood in the church where she'd once hidden in shadows, wearing a wedding dress of her own creation, white silk embroidered with Apache symbols her mother had taught her, combined with Irish lace patterns honoring her father's heritage. Ben waited at the altar in his father's cavalry uniform, altered to fit perfectly. The same townspeople who'd once crossed themselves at her approach now filled the pews, their faces showing complex mixtures of shame and newfound respect. Dr. Martinez had asked for the honor of giving her away as part of his own journey toward redemption. As Elena walked down the aisle, she thought about her mother's words. "Strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up until you become someone who can help others stand." Elena had found her strength, her voice, and her place in a community that had finally learned to see her clearly. But most importantly, she'd found a man who'd recognized her worth from the beginning. As they exchanged vows in both English and Apache, Elena felt her mother's presence like warm wind across the desert. The woman they'd called cursed had become what she'd always been: blessed, beloved, and finally, truly free.